It is a very special honor and a privilege to be here with you on this day. And I hope by the end of the day I will win a few of you over to understand the importance of the Battle of New Orleans. How many of you have heard the story that's come down through history quite inaccurately that the Battle of New Orleans did not matter because the peace treaty had been signed 2 weeks before the battle was fought? Many of you have. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The Battle of New Orleans is one of the most critical battles in our nation's history. 197 years ago this day, on the plains of Chalmette, which were basically sugarcane fields, the very existence of our nation hung in the balance. The most diverse, unusual fighting force ever put together in the history of this nation stood against the best army in the world. This army, under the iron will of Andrew Jackson, stood against this mighty force. This army that spoke at least 4 different languages from when Jackson gave an order until it made it to every soldier. This army of Americans that consisted of Tennessee and Kentucky and Mississippi volunteers. This army that consisted of French and Spanish militias from Louisiana, of Acadians from Louisiana, of U.S. regulars from the 7th and 44th U.S. Infantry, of sailors from the United States Navy, of Marines from the United States Marines, of free African Americans of Louisiana, and even some slaves who had joined their ranks to fight for the United States. It consisted of every economic class, every ethnic group, every racial group. There was even a battalion of loyal Choctaw Indians among Jackson's forces. And yes, let us not forget probably the most colorful group of the entire bunch, and that bunch of pirates under the name of John Lafitte, who made up most of the artillery, which played a vital difference in the story of the battle that I'll talk more about later. This army, so diverse, many of whom had never fired a shot in anger. As the sun rose that day at Chalmette, January 8, 1815, across the field they saw 8,000 battle-hardened British soldiers about to advance toward them. This army, the bulk of which had already defeated Napoleon on the battlefields of Europe, came marching in column across those open fields, bagpipes blaring, drums pounding, and here are these young men and older men of all this cross-section of the United States waiting for this onslaught. The British, in their confidence, felt the Americans, as they had many times during the War of 1812, that this raw militia would just melt away, just throw down their weapons and run away. And had there been anybody else in command, that may have been what had happened. Had the British destroyed that American force, had they taken the city of New Orleans, the War of 1812 would probably have dragged on, and the very existence of our nation might have been called into question. I'll talk more about that later. But what I'd like you all to remember today is that under the dynamic leadership of Andrew Jackson, this unusual group of only about 5,000 men with such a diverse background, they stood behind their earthwork. They stood behind their artillery pieces. This group of individuals that could never, on paper, have matched up against that oncoming British force, they stood their ground. And right there behind them was Andrew Jackson, leading them through the battle. The battle would rage for about 2 hours with about 20 minutes of heavy fighting. And when the smoke would clear, laying in front of that rampart were almost 2,000 British casualties, including their commanding general, their second-in-command, their third-in-command had been seriously wounded, and the fourth-in-command, General Lambert, finally says, you know, this is not a good idea. And he finally had the guts to call off the attacks. Behind the rampart, Jackson had lost 13 men, 6 killed and 7 wounded. The battle would change everything. It would lead to the ratification of the treaty. It would lead to a status quo. And in an ironic twist of history, it would be the last heavy battle fought between the United States and the nation of Great Britain. From that battlefield, from the ashes of that battle, from those tremendous losses, would grow a mutual respect that would lead the two nations together to face the problems of the future and lead to an undying alliance that exists to this very day. So if anybody ever tries to tell you that the Battle of New Orleans is not important to the history of this nation, I hope you will remind them that yes, it was. And if you do a little more reading, or if you're able to join us for my lecture at 3:30, I'll see if I can convince you even more so. Thank you all for being here on this very special day, and enjoy your visit. Thank you.